feeling good, can I tell?
Okay, Hotel family, my name is Brother Ray. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr., Louis Ray Rivera, El-Haj Malik Al-Shabazz, the late attorney at war, Alton Maddox, Amos Wilson, Gil Noble, Minister Khalid, and all the historians who gave up fame and fortune. Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Ivan Van Sertima, Miss Leona Maddox, Renoko Rashidi, and all the individuals who gave up fame and fortune because they believed in burning the midnight oil to bring truth to the people. We honor them. Miss Leona Maddox, who used to come to the UAM, and she had an old car, Toyota, ran good, and she drove that car all the way from Teaneck to the UAM because she believed in bringing people together. She believed in having live lectures and having speakers, so we never want to forget the work of Miss Leola Maddox. We want to give her a great big hand, because she went beyond the call of duty. But for the people that came out today in this heat to support the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. Club, give them a great big hand. Yes, so now I'm bringing the camera over to the Amos collection. This is in honor of Amos Wilson. So Babu can continue the work of Amos. We have Blueprint for Black Power. We have Amos' new classic that Sababa finished, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat Toward the African Mind. Amos' classic, The Psychodynamic of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination, Black on Black Violence. Everybody is talking about black on black violence, but nobody's talking about this book. Everywhere you go, the wars, what they doing in the street, big city mayors, congressmen, all the people running their mouth on black violence. But they never mention Amos's classic. And it states, the psychodynamics of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. So we are still being dominated. African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order. The falsification of African consciousness. Amos's classic, The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child, Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children, Issues of Manhood in Black and White, and Louis Ray Rivera, Jazz in Jail, Revealing the Unspeakable Bible Verses, Earl Ponder, and Distorted Truths, the Bastardization of African Cosmology by S.K. Damiano. So we have these books for the Amos collection to help Sababa continue the work of Amos Wilson. Now, in honor of Louis Ray Rivera, we had the book Jazz in Jail. Louis Ray Rivera would come to Mackey's when Mackey left us, and he would speak for hours, and we would walk him home, and he'd speak for another hour and a half. We never want to forget Louis Ray Rivera in his book Jazz in Jail. Classic publication in honor of Louis Ray. Never want to forget it. We also have some more publications that we want the Zoom audience and for educational purposes only, to do your research, to get information when you don't believe what anybody says. You can get books in honor of Dr. Ben, we have Black Man of the Nile and his family. This is in honor of the great Dr. Ben. And he went beyond the call of duty with his work, and he has all the stuff on ancient Kemet, not too many computers, so we always want to thank Dr. Ben. Dr. Randy Short, in his publication, Slavery Mastery, Randy Short, The Impact of Religious Slavery Revealed. We have this book in honor of Dr. Randy Short. Thanks to Professor Mackey. I was looking at an old lecture and he had this in there and it says, the modern woman look at Orthodox and Hasidic Judaism. This is titled A Hole in the Street. And we have this book by Evelyn Kay. Excellent publication. In honor of Louis Ray and Brother Trust Grant, Max Dumont, Jews, God, and History. This is an excellent publication, and I was reading it, and there's a lot of historical facts that they have, but it's basically created. So you have people that created a lot of stuff, and Max Dumont brings this out. So we want to honor this book right here. Everywhere you go, family, everywhere you go, you see medical marijuana, weed spots. They popping up all over the place. People smoking weed like it ain't nothing. Matter of fact, the mayor, the governor, the legislators voted for these weed shops to come up. And people are actually waiting for the weed shops to open so they could buy this weed. Just like when they was waiting for the liquor store to open. So how does this phenomenon come along? Well, we want to thank Lyndon LaRouche, Dope Incorporated, the British Opium War against the world. And the British got the whole world strung out. And funny thing about it is on page 47, I believe, you have a picture of George Soros. And a lot of people don't understand the significance of this man and what he's doing. So we have this book, Dope Incorporated. You can purchase it at any bookstore. Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization. Great Issues of a Race from 1445 BC to 2000 AD. And Chancellor Williams gets into bread and butter and the mistakes we made as African people. Wars, Queen Nzinga. So we want to thank Chancellor Williams for coming through with this. Now, I picked this up inside the secret network of George Soros, the man behind the curtain. And basically, this is a book that tells you the secret working of George. And this guy is something else. Ladies and gentlemen, I wind up picking up this book, and everybody's a fan of two-term President Barack Obama. Well, this book, The Manufacturing of a President, the CIA's insertion of Barack Hussein Obama into the White House, also known as Barry Soetoro. We want to thank Wayne Mansfield for this book. It's readily available. You can purchase it and read it and find out exactly what's going on. Now, I want to thank the Irritated Genie on Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. I love this woman right here. Cynthia McKinney. Her book, When China Sneezes, From the Coronavirus Lockdown to the Global Political Economic Crisis. And ladies and gentlemen, if you happen to tune in to Sankofa Revolutionary Radio, Io Kamati, the irritated genie, had Sister Cynthia McKinney, and she laid down some facts that will blow your mind. In my personal opinion, she's the only one that cared about the people in the state of Georgia, and they wind up getting out of it. This book right here, you have to purchase. And it's excellent. When China Sneezes, from the coronavirus lockdown to the global political economic crisis. So we have that, and it was another book that she mentioned, and I just brought it from Amazon. And when Donald Trump made that statement on S-hole countries, I want to thank Cynthia McKinney, and I want to thank Cynthia McKinney. Jasmine, come and look through the screen and see if you can see me. Cynthia McKinney mentioned the book, and the title of the book is How the U.S. Creates S-Hole Countries. I purchased it on Amazon. Can you see me? From you looking at that screen, can you see me clear?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Okay, good. As long as you can see me in the screen right now.
I can see you.
Okay, good enough. All right, thank you. So Cynthia McKinney mentioned this book, and I wound up purchasing it Amazon. How the U.S. Creates S-Hole Countries. How the U.S. Creates S-Hole Countries on Amazon. There we go. The name of this book, and I want to thank Cynthia McKinney for coming up with it. It's called How the U.S. Creates S-Hole Countries. There is a book entitled, and it's edited by Cynthia McKinney. And if you get this book, introduction by Sina Gravel, and it's called How the U.S. Creates S-Hole Countries. So when you hear the president talk about a country being a shithole country, S-hole country, there's a book entitled How the U.S. Creates S-H-T-H-O-L-E Countries. And I want to thank Cynthia McKinney for mentioning that book. So I picked that up, and I'm going to be reading that in a little while. So now, everybody's talking about reparations. They're giving all these committees and studies, and everybody should go down and get this book Without Sanctuary. And this is basically a pictorial of the postcards of the hangings, how they fried African people, they gathered there, the lynchings, and they all came up. Now everybody want to get a study. You even got some people running around talking about slavery happened to everybody. So what are we talking about? But they must don't have this book, Without Sanctuary. Another book, Dr. Scott Whitaker, Medicine, and he's out of the state of Georgia. In his book, The Causes and Solutions to Disease, Malnutrition, and the Medical Sins That Are Killing the World. This is Dr. Scott Whitaker's publication. We have these at the Mackey's Group. You could get these, get in touch with me, but they have them. You can get them on Amazon and other places that sell the books. But when you listen to Dr. Scott Whitaker, this book is unbelievable. We want to thank Michael Dow in this publication, Causes Unknown. The impact of sudden death 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. 2025, because every time you turn around, you hear how people are basically collapsing, and a lot of youngsters on the football field, and they have the pictures, they have the publications, they have the stories of all these people collapsing, and football players, soccer players, and they collapsing on the field. And we want to thank Edward Down. They have the pictures on this book, a lot of information. Okay. Capitalism on a Ventilator. I was cruising and I found this book, The Impact of the 19 and China and the US. So we have this book, and there's a lot of information in this book. I wound up picking it up, and it's very hard to find now because I tried to get some more copies, but we have it. Also, another book, The Shadow Party, How George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and radical Democrats took control of the Democratic Party. This is another publication by David Horowitz and Richard Poe that talks about the takeover of the Democratic Party, Soros. So it's not like the information is not there. We also have Blank is the Problem. From the Corona lockdown, media censorship, we want to thank Ayo Kamati for this book. An excellent, excellent, excellent publication. Raji, check that thing and see if everything is cool. Excellent publication. You can see me in there?
Yeah, you good.
Excellent publication. And we want to thank Irritated Genie. Now, you think this thing is over, but it's not. You got to read these books, family. You got to read these books. Because if you don't read these books, you're really not going to find out what's going on, and the information is out there. The Truth About 19, Joseph McCullough, Ronald Cummings, Exposing the Great Reset, and presidential candidate Robert Kennedy Jr. forwarded this one, and The Real Anthony Fauci. You saw the congressional hearings. They got them all on YouTube. Go into YouTube and look at the congressional hearings and see what kind of thing went on. They had Fauci up there. Also, we got two more publications by Brian Hooker, Robert Kennedy, Vax versus Unvax, Let the Science Speak, and the Wuhan Cover-Up. Presidential candidate Robert Kennedy gets into a lot of the stuff that's going on, and they're trying to push him out of the debate, but let me tell you, he's going to deal with medical freedom. And that's one of the most important decisions that we have to understand, medical freedom. And that's something that was just taken away. So we have these two books, and you can get the books, and you can do your reading. Because if you don't know what's going to happen. You have to get the books and read. On YouTube, they even had Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul. He wrote a book, Deception and the Great Cover-Up. He actually questioned Fauci. It's on YouTube. This book, he wrote a book, and these are Congress people. So he wrote a book, and you get the book and you read it, and that's what it's all about. So we have these publications. Now I'm going to give you a few community events for information for the community, for you to find, do your research, listen, and you could talk. Every Thursday, Thorough Black Talk with Tad, Keisha, Ashe, Brother Black and Sister Mama, aka Sister Marcia. That program comes on YouTube and Facebook Live every Thursday at 8 o'clock, and that's one of the hottest shows on the East Coast. Sister Keisha, Tad, Brother Black, Sister Mama, they be hitting it live, and that's 8 o'clock every Thursday. Also, our Power Pack sisters and our Philadelphia connection with Brother Lumumba, Sister Empress G, Blog Talk Radio. That program comes on every Saturday at 10:30 p.m. And the number is 1319-527-6189. And our Sister Empress Chi, I tell you, Sister Filet, Brother Lumumba, and man, everybody, they just do an excellent job. And we love our Baltimore. Sister Pam, everybody, Raza Khan, we love them. They just unbelievable. Now, this is very important, family. And if you're up on Mondays at 10 o'clock in the morning, Io Kamati, Sankofa Revolutionary Radio, that's WSYP 95.1 FM out of Birmingham, Alabama. And let me tell you something, Brother Io has Sister Cynthia McKinney on that program. And if you could catch him when he come on next Monday and ask him, can you listen to that program and how can you get a copy of that program with Cynthia McKinney? I want to thank Io and I want to thank Sister Cynthia McKinney. And this is a person that was a congresswoman and went up against Rumsfeld and asked the hard questions. If you could get that, Sankofa Revolutionary Radio, every Monday at 10 p.m. and you can actually phone in and talk to Brother Io. So, now, our Power Pack Baltimore family, Brother Darren Muhammad, State of the City, he's giving so much information on what's coming down on Baltimore, the State of the City, Saturday at 12 o'clock. He comes on sometime Wednesday, sometime Thursday. But Darren Muhammad, TuneIn Radio, Facebook Live, and on Instagram under State of the City Baltimore. We want to thank our Baltimore connection, Brother Darren Muhammad, with his program, and he's just laying it down live. Also, every Tuesday, Dr. Aline, Your Immunity Project, comes on 7 o'clock. Kyle Fani Radio and Your Immunity Project, Dr. Aline is giving up some excellent health tips and information, what's going on with the global health crisis and the 19 and everything. So we have that. Ladies and gentlemen, every Friday, the African Echo Study Group out of Newark, New Jersey, Brother Trust Graham, Brother True, Danny, and all the people there, they have a study group, and they come on African Echoes, and they'll put the information in the chat. Everybody comes on, and that's at Saturday at 8 o'clock. And they're doing the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward the African mind. Also, not only do they hit you on Saturday, Friday, they also come back Saturday with the Know Thyself study group with Brother True and the knowledgeable brothers coming out of Asbury Park, and they're doing the destruction of black civilization. And that's with Brother True and them, and Trust is also the mediator. So you get a 1-2 punch Friday and Saturday if you can handle it, you know. The Simotap organization with James McIntosh and Sister Richardine, they had a good party for Betty Dobson, and the program Minefield has changed from, they come on Tuesday at 10 o'clock and they had a brother on there, and what's so good now, you could go on SoundCloud and actually listen to the past programs. So we want to thank Dr. McIntosh. I listened to the brother that did the 10-part series, the 10 sessions on the Maroons. I can't pronounce his name, but that was an excellence program. We want to thank the Simotap organization. And if you go into Simotap, James McIntosh and them will tell you everything that's going on. They're also giving out flyers to put on the doors in the religious institutions to let you, listen, we must start standing up and stop this onslaught of disrespect for African people. A people that people does not respect will never get nowhere. So you're running around thinking that they're going to give you some reparations and you can't even, and they dogging us out in the media and the movies. This disgusting portrayal of good times, the cartoon, you have to stand up and stop this. So they have a flyer give out to people to let them know to cancel that Netflix because it's a disgusting cartoon. And if you think they're going to give you something and you can't even stop the media from disrespecting us on TV and this and that, what is Amos and all them going through all this for? This is what they're doing. This is what Mackie and them spent their life doing. This is what the speakers come here for truth. And then we're going to sit up there and let these cartoon characters and these people in the media at Netflix and any other company owned by just disrespect us, and you're not going to stand up. I want to thank the Semotap organization. And we had a march out there, and we're going to go out there again. So thank you, Semotap. Also, if you want to view any of the past lectures of the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club, you could go on YouTube under BK William Mackey Jr. You could go through all the lectures, you could do your home research, whatever you don't like what a speaker says, you could go to it and research it yourself. The docu-series by Dr. Lewis on Burkina Faso, Dr. Monderson on Kemet, Mike Graves, these are going to be docu-series and lecture after lecture after lecture to give information to the global community. So that's what the Mackey Study Group is about, to give information and educational purposes. So ladies and gentlemen, give yourself a great big hand for coming out. And without further ado, this is just a continuation because as Dr. Monderson said, Dr. Ben gave him instructions to continue the work. Runoko Rashidi, he left us too soon. So Monderson, and this is going to be part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and it's going to go on and on. So this stuff could get out there. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, give our keynote speaker for the night. We want to thank you for coming back. This is part 3 on the Temple of Luxor and everything that's going on in that great continent of Akibaland, Akiba. Give Dr. Fred Monderson a great big hand. Yo! Let's go, baby.
Okay.
Thank you, Ryan.
Hotep family, they often say, we gotta have you back, but they never do. But I gotta thank Brother Ray. He's a stand-up guy, and he's got me back. Without much further ado, here's the plan of action, the plan of attack. My topic to this evening is the Temple of Luxor. If you've ever been there, Luxor is a magnificent piece of classical architecture. If you haven't been there, you should go to see it. So here's the plan of attack. So I'm going to give you an introduction. I'm going to deal with the history of the temple, the architecture of the temple, the art of the temple, and then the cosmic, philosophical, spiritual nature of the Temple of Luxor. again, I want to thank Brother Ray for having me back, as well as I was checking the archives, and I'm sure you know this guy here, the old fellow that makes those fantastic presentations, Dr. Lewis. When he had here, this is the days of Roy Cantor. He's sitting here with Professor James Smalls. We go back to the 90s. I found this photograph and I thought I would share it with you. I wanted to give it to Dr. Lewis, like I have so many others of them. But what the photograph does indicate is that he didn't just arrive. Dr. Lewis has been out there for the longest. So perhaps he'll show up later. So, of course, you remember my work on Sonny Carson and the final triumph. For Sonny Carson, the final triumph was the return of the runaway slave, the bones of the runaway slave to Ghana in West Africa, to create a site of pilgrimage for Africans seeking their heritage in Africa. I came out with this one called More Woman, More Power. All of my work is on Amazon. You can just insert my name and you will see my work. I was here the last time I mentioned my newest book called American Pyramid of Power Crumbling Under Donald Trump. Well, I have another one here called Leaderless Republicans. Leaderless Republicans. Not what I have said, but what so many people have said in terms of expressing their views about the gentleman. Naturally, Sharpton's cliche, get your knee off our necks, it's all there on Amazon. And I'd like to remind you of my Afrocentric response with the invasion of Somalia in '92. I said, don't go, let the OAU handle the Somalia situation. Unfortunately, we had Black Hawk Down, which was an embarrassment for the nation. So, as an introduction to my topic this evening, I tell you that given the Temple of Luxor is essentially a new kingdom construction dedicated to the Theban triad of Amun-Ra, the sun god, Mut, his wife, the earth goddess, and their son, Khonsu, the moon god, its principal god was Amun-Ra of Karnak temple trade. Previously in another setting I had done a 12-volume series on Karnak temple, one of those structures that took 2,000 years to build. Hopefully Brother Ray would allow that information to get to you ultimately. Karnak and Luxor, the two temples are inextricably intertwined and have several contrasts, pro and con, that can be made, especially their architectural layout. Both have a girdle wall, a surrounding wall that encloses the structure. Luxor is built of mud brick, consisting of a triple system of horizontal, vertical lays. The Temple of Luxor was essentially built for the most part by Amenhotep III of the 18th dynasty. They have been Amenhotep's 1, 2, and 3, and 4. They have been Thutmosis 1, 2, and 3, and 4. People generally get them confused, but this is the hereditary of those two 18th dynasty family groups. So you have the 18th dynasty was founded by Ahmose. He is actually a 17th dynasty holdover who founded the 18th dynasty simply because the 18th dynasty marked the expulsion of the Hyksos, and as a result, Manito, the Greek Egyptian priest, started a new era with him. So we've got Ahmose, and his son was Amenhotep I. Amenhotep I's son is Thutmose I. Thutmose had 3 children. Thutmose II, Hatshepsut, and Thutmose III. Thutmose III's son was Amenhotep II. Amenhotep's son was Thutmose IV. Thutmose IV's son was Amenhotep III, and Amenhotep's son was Amenhotep IV. So there you have a bit of an explanation that is not too confusing, indicating that, especially that Thutmose IV is not the son of Thutmose III. Anyway, so while Amenhotep III made additions to Karnak temple, such as the processional colonnade and the 3rd pylon, he essentially built Luxor temple. He built what is called the covered temple, and this much I'm going to explain as we go along. So he built Luxor temple in its original plan. More important, 2 gods were worshipped at Luxor, and for which there were 2 sanctuaries. It's one of those rare instances where you have 2 principal gods in the same temple, and you have 2 sanctuaries in the same temple. So, for the 2 gods worshipped there, in fact, there was actually 3 gods because the king was considered a god. So you have Amenhotep, you have Amen-Ra, and you have Amenhotep, a king considered a god. So 3 divinities were worshipped at Luxor, but only 2 sanctuaries were in place. More important, while there were 2 gods worshipped at Luxor, for which there were 2 sanctuaries for Amen-Ra and Amenemo, and with the king himself considered God, at times there were 3 divinities in residence. At the time of the Opet festival, therefore, the king is there, Amen-Ra is there, and they're worshipped in Amenemopet. And as such, we can thus firmly see a family relationship of a father, a son, and a grandfather. So in this respect, Amenemopet is the grandfather, Amen-Ra is the father, and the king is their son. Yet, Chouala de Lobis, a Frenchman, did the most extensive study of the Temple of Luxor. He spent 15 years going to the temple every day, measuring every facet, every brick, every aspect of it, recording it, and came to the conclusion as to the purpose of Luxor temple. So Chouala de Lobis explained, the temple of Luxor is indisputably devoted to the human microcosm. And he's going to go on to say that the human person is a scaled-down version of the universe. In relating to such, he speaks of transformation and transparency, noting, quote, and I will dispense with the page numbers and what have you, it's all in the record. But Ray, I know that you generally like to get this, so let me give essentially the bibliography for my presentation. and this is the second part. So the evidence is there. When you do your own research, you can look it up. So in transposition and transparency, he says, there is no need to conceal teaching. On the contrary, the purpose of transposing and transparency is to explain vital symbols, functional, symbolically. James Henry Breasted, the American father of Egyptology, in his 5-volume set, Ancient Records of Egypt, published from 1905 to 1908, has provided the name of King Amenhotep III, along with the purpose and name of his 18th dynasty, name that the king gave to the temple he constructed. He was considered king of Upper and Lower Egypt, lord of the two lands, Neb-Mar-Re, heir to Ra, son of Ra, lord of diadems, Amenhotep III, ruler of Thebes. He is satisfied with the building for his father, Amen-Ra, lord of Thebes, in the southern Opet. So the Amen had two principal temples, Karnak, the principal temple, and Luxor, which was a sort of a vacation residence, but it was also the home of that first god I mentioned, Amenhotep. And it's interesting that Amenhotep is the prefix of the festival of Opet, which is one of the greatest festivals that occurred in the Egyptian calendar. So the name of the temple that he gave, he said that he's built this temple in the southern Opet of fine white sandstone. It was made very wide and large, and its beauty increased. Its walls are of electrum. Its floor is of silver, and the portals are wrought with a fancy stone. I don't have the name for it. Its towers reach to heaven and mingle with the stars. When the people see it, they give praise to His Majesty. So, in this respect, John Assman, he wrote The Mind of Egypt, the history and meaning in the time of the pharaohs. And he explained that the paradigmatic shift of religious meaning from political theology. You just had political theology because he said that when the people see the temple, they praise its maker. To the temple cult, so let me start again. The paradigmatic shift of religious meaning from political theology to the temple cult is evident in the transformed figure of Amun. In the New Kingdom, the temple of Luxor and the annual Luxor feast, the annual Luxor feast was the Opet festival, were the site and occasion for the cultic transformation of the king as son of God. So this guy goes in there as a human and comes out as a god. Luxor was the place where the king was symbolically begotten by Amun and recognized as his son. This begetting and recognition were ritually performed in connection with the coronation and was repeated every year. Naturally, Amun played the part of the father in this festival about the birth of the god king. And Amun's father was Amenhotep. But now he was invested in the role of son, as well as enacted it in a separate festival that took him to the western side of Thebes every 10 days to perform the mortuary offering to his deceased divine ancestors. That is to say that every 10 days, Amun visited Luxor and crossed over to the valley to celebrate the Feast of the Valley, in which his predecessor kings, he succeeded, that are buried essentially in the valley, and they had their mortuary temples on the west bank. He visited each one of them as a devoted son would visit his father. So as a father god, he is now a son worshiping his ancestors. Naturally, Amun had played a part of the father in his festival about the birth of the son, but now he was invested in the role of son as well, and acted in a separate festival that took him to the western side of Thebes every 10 days to perform the mortuary offering to his deceased ancestors. When they returned from the western part of the valley, they returned back to Karnak, and they visited a temple that Taharqa, the 25th dynasty pharaoh, constructed beside the sacred lake in Karnak temple, where that ceremony was given its official final sanction before Amun returned to his sanctuary, also at Karnak. As such, and in this respect, Amun being the central figure at the Luxor Temple Open Festival, the Medinet Habu Festival of the Valley, and the Festival of Min. So we have the Open Festival, Festival of Valley, the Festival of Min, the 10-day festival. While in the Temple of Man, which is the book written by Swallow the Lubis, we read of psycho-spiritual knowledge, the general idea of the philosophy of measures, a proof of symbolism, undeniable knowledge of geodesy, and that a naos, which is a proportional and decorated shrine intended to hold a sacred object, a bark, which is a god's ceremonial boat, a linen chest, are not simply cult objects for daily use. They also represent organ and functions of life, man being taken as the summation of all possibilities immanent in the universe. What he's saying is that we need to understand truly what is the meaning of being human, of being a man. And those who desecrate this sacred vessel called a man, in some way or the other, they have a price to pay. So we read of a transformation, and as such, in his book, he speaks of Pharaonic Egypt maintained the Osirian cult. So in all of these festivals, Osiris remained a consistent philosophic religious figure throughout most of dynastic rule, until perhaps by the time of the Greeks and the Romans came, which is after the 25th dynasty, after the 30th dynasty. Reincarnation, the temple elite is taught. So the general populace believed in Osiris as the God who will save them from resurrection. The temples taught two types of religion: the religion for the high and the religion for the low. Those of the low were taught about Osiris, those of the high were taught about Horus, the Hosarian principle, because he was considered the redeemer. Okay, so the king was able to be mediator for the gods who lived in the heavens, as well as Osiris, who lived in the terrestrial region beneath the earth. Okay, there is a belief that when you die, you will go to heaven, but your body was laid in the earth. So these two gods, competing for the spirit and soul of the individual, ultimately had to come together and form a kind of a compromise. Because at the end of the day, when the sun transited the heavens, the belief was that it passed under the earth where Osiris was king before it would rise on eastern horizon the next day. So in that nightly transit, he had to contend with Osiris, and in the arrangement, he agreed to shine his powerful beams on the dead for an hour. So everybody looked forward to the sun god Ra transiting the underground in order to get back to the eastern horizon to begin that continuous process of night and day and night and day. So, Luxor Temple and all, especially late Egyptian temples, manifested a cosmological significance. They established a connection between heaven and earth. In this respect, again, as one speaks, essentially the floor of these temples represented the earth and the ceiling the sky. Columns took the form of plants rising from the earth, and the dados on the wall were decorated with marshy plants with processions of fecundity figures, personification of fruitfulness that always face the inner part of the temple, bearing offerings. We sometimes see these as Nile gods bringing the fruits of their domain. They're often seen on the outskirts of the temple walls or sometimes within on the base of the inner wall. As the sky, the ceilings were decorated with stars or with astronomical representations. Between the floor and ceiling, between earth and sky, stretched the decoration of the walls with the endless sculpt scenes filling the stony cosmos in effigy with action and life. That is to say, the art of Egypt is essentially of a religious nature, and in this, the whole theology is explained, because generally we would see the priests in procession carrying the bark of the god on their head, on their shoulders. The king is in attendance. You see incensing the bark, and on the walls is the seemingly as a book, the words or the writings of the ritual. So Osman therefore remarked, he said, viewed from the outside, the temple is a highly protected area, an enclave of the sacred in a profound world. That is to say, if you think about the temple, how it was constructed in that time, it was in a city, and it was enclosed in an enclosure wall. So it is a sacred vessel in a profane world, a tightly sealed vessel of radiant divine power that has mysteriously taken up earthly residence on the spot. That is to say, we have to understand this whole idea of building the temple is not a sort of foregone conclusion. The king said, I want to build a temple. He has to choose someone that is spiritually, psychological, religiously in tune with the workings of the divine, with the heavenly parade of the gods and what have you, so that when he builds a temple, his temple has to be perfect. Then it is handed over to the god, the resident of the temple. And if everything is not as it's supposed to be, 110% or 100%, the god said, I'm not coming. So the builder, the architect, has to be in tune with psychic, spiritual, metaphysical powers. So on outside, it's a sealed, a tightly sealed vessel of radiant divine power that has mysteriously taken up residence on this very spot. But viewed from within, this vessel is holiness separated from the world. It is itself the world, an entire world. that is to say, within the temple. You know, we've often said that, okay, for example, Thebes or that temple is the sanctuary of a particular god. But in the temple itself, there is a separate structure called the sanctuary where the god resides. So from within, the vessel of holiness separated from the world is itself an entire world. The temple represents a cosmos beyond which there is nothing more. The cult image filled the temple with an emanation of divine presence, while at the same time the God filled the entire cosmos with the radiance of his manifestation. The cosmic symbolism of Egyptian temples rests on this antiphony between interior and exterior, between local times and omnipresence of the divine manifestation. The naos is to say, in the sanctuary itself, there is another building, a little small place where the bark of the god resides, and this has a door. So when the priest, in order to perform the divine ritual of the day, when the priest opens the door to the sanctuary, he says, I am opening the door of heaven. And once he opens the door, he begins uttering different statements. And he would say essentially that I am a priest of this temple, Your Honor, or however you choose to address the God, who is in his room. I am a priest of this temple. I am here to do what is it. There is nothing evil about me. And either he's accompanied by an assistant or he himself begins asperging or incensing the area before he advances. When he advances, he prostrates himself, and then he approaches the naos, which has a door, and he opens that door. I'm opening the doors of heaven. And once he opens the door, there's a blind, and he removes the blind, and he sees the image of his veneration, the God he worships. And he's here to attend to him, do his, what we would call his morning routine. He takes him out. First, of course, he has to say, Your worship, my honor, my master, I need to have your permission to remove you from the nails. He has asked the God to pick him up. He gets permission, he removes him, he begins disrobing him, he has to clean him, wash him, bathe him, he has to perfume him, you have to put on his makeup and what have you, he has to dress him, and all the time he's incensing to keep away evil spirits, or he has an assistant. Not everybody goes in there. Even the people in the procession who are carrying food, drink, water, incense, playing music, all of these things, they can only go so far. It's only a select people go in there. Now, as we will talk about Luxor, okay, especially at the time of the Open Festival, certain segments of the population in the procession from Karnak to Luxor, it's a big population that follows the procession. As they approach the temple of Luxor, most of them sort of dissipate. Only so many are allowed within the walls, and they transit the great court, the processional colonnade, into the second court, and then the procession dwindles and they enter what is called the covered temple, the real part of the enclosed part, and only a select few can go in there. Now, the higher-ups in the social order that are allowed to enter into, let's say, the middle reaches of the temple, they would sit out there and await the return of the king after he has been transformed into a divinity. But again, only a set number of people will go further into the Luxor temple structure, which we consider to be the covered temple. So the cosmic symbolism of Egyptian temples rests on the antimony between interior and exterior, between local times and omnipresence of the divine manifestation. The naos on which the cult statue rests is the remotest part of the sky. Again, the temple is heaven. And when we talk about sky, the remotest part of the sky, that's where the gods are born. Okay, that is the holiest part of the heavens. What is heaven on earth in the temple, in the naos. The doors of the shrine are celestial gates through which the sun god passes in the morning. You see, the sun god is born. We often hear the early bird catches the worm. I was making a joke about a guy collecting bottles. He comes in at 11 o'clock in the morning, hoping to find. The guy who really collects the bottles is out there, 6, 7. The worm is saying, I'm not waiting around for this guy coming in 11. So he leaves. Now the sun god is born after he's made a transit from underneath, having met with Osiris. He is born in the morning about 4 o'clock. So when we see that red ball in the sky, that is the afterbirth of the god. Right? Then now, his back attendants, he has 2. Horus and Thoth. They fix his backwater. We talking serious business here. They have to test to see that the sun god's backwater is not too hot. You can't burn it. Then they do what is called the daily ritual. But this is theoretical because it happens in the heavens. What happens here is supposed to be a duplication of that. So we have theoretical, we have actual, and the actual is supposed to represent. And again now, the sun god gets 2. He gets 1 in the morning when he wakes up, and gets 1 with the daily ritual of the divine order. So the remainder of the temple in the world is the world that the sun god floods with light when he appears in the east in the morning. The nails in the temple does have an internal-external relationship to one another. So again, what's happening inside there relates to what's happening outside in the temple per se, in the sanctuary, and then in the temple per se. When the doors of the shrine are open, the priest recites a hymn that says, essentially, depending on the particular temple, he said, the door leaves of the sky are open and always face the inner part of the temple bearing offerings. Viewed from the outside, the temple is a highly protected area, an enclave of the sacred in a profane world, a tightly sealed vessel of radiant divine power that has mysterious statement of, I've said this before, but I'm repeating, but viewed from within, this vessel of holiness, separated from the world, is itself an entire world. The temple represents a cosmos beyond which there is nothing more. So the cult image fills the temple with an emanation of divine presence, while at the same time the God filled the entire cosmos with the radiance of his manifestation. Just as temple architecture actualized the cosmos aspect of the earth with its plant-shaped columns and its friezes of plants, so the procession of gods actualized the land in its social aspects. This also expressed the Egyptian view of the world, which is interpreted the cosmos as a society. This was also true of the sky, whose cosmic aspect was represented on the ceiling of the temples. The social aspect of the heavens was represented by the secondary deos, who were worshipped in the chapel surrounding the Holy of Holies. So generally you have the Holy of Holies, the sanctuary, where the principal divinity is resident in a naos, but there are surrounding rooms where other divinities are represented, depending on how many people are associated with that particular temple. For example, okay, so we have the Heliopolis Aeneid, that is the company of gods that live with the principal god. So in the Heliopolis Aeneid, where Ra was worshipped, so you have Nut and Geb, Tefnut and his brother, Osiris, Isis, Set, Nephthys, and later Horus, for 9 gods of the Aeneid. Okay, at Heliopolis, at Hermopolis, where thought, the god of wisdom, knowledge, and what have you, was the principal divinity, there were 4 pairs of gods, 8, that he created by laughing 8 times. Ha ha, ha ha, ha ha, ha ha. And these 8 gods appeared with predetermined manifestations or duties that they will perform, and he added to that, created them 9. At Karnak, the Aeneid consisted of 15 members. So each one of these people surrounded the principal residence or the principal room of the principal god. So when we speak of you probably remember Dr. Jack Felder. He was around with Roy Cantor, James Smalls, Dr. Lewis, but he once visited my home, and I showed him a plan of the temple. And the first thing he said, he's the only man who said, Fred, I read everything you wrote, that after I'd written 1,000 pieces for. He was saying to me that the plan of the temple was in itself a computer. So back then, these guys knew their business, okay? So within that structure surrounding the principal god were these rooms that, in Jack's estimation, it represented the structure, the format of a computer. So just as temple architecture actualized the cosmic aspect of the earth, its plant-shaped columns and its friezes of plants, so the procession of gods actualized the land in its social aspect. This also expressed the cosmos as a society. This was true of the sky, whose cosmic aspect was represented on the ceiling of the temples. You know, it's been said that Senwin, who was Queen Hatshepsut's principal architect, and he built her temple at Dirabari, among other things. He erected 2 obelisks for her and what have you. He was the only one who could enter the royal bedroom. Some people said that they had a relationship going on, but he secretly built a tomb in the precinct of Queen Hatshepsut's mortuary temple at Dirabari. And the ceiling was decorated. And the argument has been that when he reposed, he wanted to see his queen among the heavenly bodies. Well, he was a smart cookie. He knew that by supporting the queen, who ruled for 2 decades, that once she fell, they would attack him. If they found his tomb, they would disfigure it. So what he did is that he decorated the walls of his tomb, and then he stuccoed it, and he decorated it again. So that when his enemies actually found his tomb within the precinct of the temple, they destroyed the art that decorated his walls. And they felt that, well, we got it. Well, circumstances were such that thousands of years later, when the paint or the stucco began to peel, scholars were able to realize what had happened. That he painted his walls 2 times so that they could, his name and his image can be protected over time. No deity was the sole occupant of his or her temple. I mentioned that there were surrounding rooms where other divinities were worshipped. The great morning liturgy, which greeted the god appearing in the sky and the cult statue awakening in the temple, you enumerated in the form of a liturgy, all constituted the sphere of belonging. Okay, when we talk about the Luxor temple, basically is a temple about 680 feet long. So you have the pillar, the pylon, you have a court, you have a procession column, you have another court, you have the hypostyle hall begins the covered temple which is the domain of the god. It's like, the temple is often equated with a domestic structure. Okay, so the temple, in approach to the temple, you have what is called an avenue of sphinxes, because generally the temple is built close to the river, but there is a walkway from the river. So this walkway is generally lined with sphinxes. Sometimes it's cross sphinxes, sphinxes of ram's head, sphinxes of human head. The great sphinx is a sphinx with a human head. There are sphinxes with ram's heads and what have you. That brings you to the gate or the pylon, and you enter into a court, and then you enter in beyond that court, you enter into the hypostyle hall, which is the area it's called the Wajid in Egypt, just before the sanctuary area the same thing is with the domestic structure. So I'm coming to visit my friend, and I come to the gate where his house is, and from the gate to his porch, his veranda, that would be equivalent to the court in the Egyptian temple. Now, I'm entering into the living room where I'm entertained, whether by food, drink, or what have you. And then there is the master's room, the bedroom, where I'm not allowed to go in there, only family members. So it's the same thing. So you have the front court, you have the living room, you have the family bedroom. You have the court, you have the pylon, which is the gate, you have the court, you have the hypostyle hall, which is equivalent to our living room, and you have the sanctuary behind there, where only God's people can go. I mean, those are the higher order. It doesn't mean because you're a priest that you can go in there. That's not your business. Still. Okay. So the king that we are talking about, Amenhotep III, one of his names is Nebmare. We got to be careful we're not confused, because only recently that I was able to decipher the meaning of the principal god at Luxor temple, Amenhotep. The Opet festival is the festival of this god. And guess what? This god is the same god we see in blackface in the Luxor temple, in the Luxor museum. And it's the same god we see in blackface at Ramses II's Abu Simbel temple. So, when the racists and those who believe in multi-genesis tell you, yes, God created man in his own image, but God was white. So he created the white man in the natural order. And since the white man is superior in the social order, so it is in the natural order. But we know that God was not white. We know that Ra and straight. But now we know that Amenemhotep, everyone celebrates the festival of Obed. He was the same as Min. Amun-Min, the guy with the enormous creative organ. So, Amenhotep III says of his temple that he made it as his monument to his father Amun-Ra, king of the gods, again erecting for him Luxor anew. So he came and he found that there was a small temple that he tore down and he built this magnificent structure, erecting for him Luxor anew, a fine white sandstone made very, very high and wide, adorned with electrum throughout, and all splendid, costly stones, a rest for Amun, a place for the rest of the Lord of gods, make like unto his horizon in heaven, that he might be given life. This temple, therefore, represented a significant pillar in the architectural majesty of New Kingdom Egypt. In addition, statuary, colonnades, and artistic decorations heightened the magnificence of this worship. Religious structure came to embody and started and signify. As such, Luxor Temple is considered a quintessential God temple. Okay, it is a magnificent piece of work. That's why you have to go and see it. Now, according to the plan of the temple, so today what you see visibly is the first pylon. It's a which rests at the end of the connecting avenue of sphinxes from Karnak Temple as the procession would approach. So we see the connecting avenue of sphinxes, a court of Nectanebo with a chapel of Serapis. That is to say, you have to remember that the temple is built from the inside out, where the God looks out to admire, appreciate, and bless his creation. From the outside in, the king and visitors looking to worship and ritualize the divinity resident inside. So, the way in which the knowledge is structured today is as how moderns approach the temple. So you enter from looking in, whereas the God looks out. So we see at the end of the avenue, we have a court that was built outside of the pylon. We have the pylon, then you have that court of Ramses the second, then there's that colonnade, there's the sun court of Amenhotep III, we have a hypostyle hall, a chamber of the divine king where the king was born as a divine entity. And then there's a second antechamber. There was the shrine that Alexander, the principal sanctuary that Alexander the Great rebuilt. There is the coronation room. And again, there was a sanctuary to the rear. I said there were two sanctuaries, you know. And this second sanctuary is the room where the statue of the Opet, Amenemhotep, whose festival is the Opet festival, where he rests. So after, in the whole transformation, then the king has to go to first sanctuary and then finally to the principal god of that temple. As I see it here. Interestingly, however, Kent Reeds, he had this book called Luxor, and he talks about American guy over there forever. And I said that he let the cat out of the bag in that, he says, throughout its long history, Luxor Temple served as a dwelling place of an ethiophilic form of the god Amun. That is to say, the god, the alter ego of Amun-Ra is this god with the creative organ out there. It's called Ithiphilic. It's closely associated with the ideas of fertility and rejuvenation. Each year, a statue of Amun left Karnak. Amun, of course, was carried in a procession to Luxor temple to greet Amun of the Opet, a man of death, in a ceremony called the Beautiful Feast of the Opet. So we're talking about this black guy that's in the back. You know, the story about when the Europeans went into Egypt, into Africa in the 19th century, and the guy, brazen as he was, came up to this council, so I want to speak to the head man. So a young guy said, well, I'm the head man. And he had said what he had to say. And then when he returned the next year, perhaps, he said, I want to speak to the head man. Well, you're not the head man. He said, we didn't know who you were. So the real head man sat there listening. So the real head man, again, you ever use the vernacular, you know, that when I always say that Jesus spoke the language of the people. Jesus didn't say thou and thou art and all that. He talked street language because he was with the people, right? The ceremony was one of the most important in Egypt's religious calendar. This is said not simply because of the image in the Luxor Museum, as I indicated. Amun is pictured in blackface, as he is also shown in Abu Simbel Temple of Ramses II. This then becomes a point of departure for young scholars in search of truth regarding the ethnicity of Egypt on the Nile River. Dr. Theophilo Benga, in his book African Philosophy, the Pharaonic Period, 2780 330 BC, he says that mathematics is the basis of civilization. And when you look at Egypt, it's a culture of mathematics. These are the people who originated the whole notion of 360 degrees, the zero, pi. So this is evident in that Egypt is a land of mathematical triangulation. From Memphis onward, you can draw lines from Memphis and get to Karnak. Where most such examples point to Karnak as a terminus or point of origin. The festival of Opet and the beautiful feast of the valley, I mentioned those already, triangulate from Karnak to Luxor, and Luxor to Medinet Habu, and back to Karnak. So, not the festival of Opet, but the 10-day festival. The procession of the god would leave Luxor, stop at Khonsu, get over to Mut, and then go on to Karnak, to Luxor. And then from Luxor, they would cross the river onto Medinet Habu. Why Medinet Habu is so important? Because there were 8 gods that died and were buried at a place on a mound at Medinet Habu, in, if you will, a small temple. There are 2 temples there. An 18th dynasty temple that was begun by Hatshepsut was added to by Ethiopians to Harka, and on that sacred spot, these 8 gods were buried. And the 8th god, when Amun came and he added to the 9, I mentioned the Enid at Heliopolis, Enid at Hermopolis, the Enid at Karnak. There was an Enid at Medinet Habu, where the 8 and Amun became 9, and he became a serpent called Karmatef, who is the ultimate pre-science entity, and they would do what they have to do, because from there he would now visit, as I said earlier, he would visit the resting places of his the king, of his ancestor kings, because he was now Amun and the king are children of Amenhotep, whose their ancestors are on the West Bank. in this, so you go from Karnak to Luxor to Medinet Habu. In all this, the temples and tombs were strongly expressed in sacred architecture. And as such, there was meaning in the symbolism of the temple. The temple is not just a building. The temple is a manifestation of power and cosmic power and scientific power, philosophical, spiritual power. Standing in the upper terrace, I was talking about mathematics and triangulation, right? But standing on the upper terrace at Medinet Habu of Queen Hatshepsut, and you can look across and see Karnak across the river 3 miles away. And if you draw, I hate to say this, but I was speaking with Brother Sababu. Brother Sababu chaired the panel discussion in Egypt in 1989 or 88. I can't remember which one, right? And I was reminiscing with him, and he was telling me about Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben, today we use that yellow marker to highlight things. But he said, Dr. Ben and that ruler, he had a ruler, he would underline everything right. So you take out your ruler and you create a line from that temple, triangulating, and you can see Karnak Temple. And not only Karnak Temple, but also the 11th Dynasty Temple of Mentuhotep II. And they all triangulate towards Karnak. So that festival from Karnak to Luxor to Medinet Habu and back to returns to Karnak in the temple that the 25th Dynasty Pharaoh Tahaka built beside the sacred lake, where the whole circle becomes complete, and from there Amun is returned back to his sanctuary. So the images at Karnak show you the priests carrying the bark of the god in this direction. You can see that they are leaving. And when you see them come do it, like pictured this way, you see that they are returning from the journey, the processional journey that they have been a part of. Right, so they come back to the sacred lake, and then they go back there. So I said that this triangulation also applies to the 500-year prior temple of Mentuhotep II. The great, so in all these instances, as is particularly evident in the Festival of Men, and I come to this great symbolist, Shuala Bis, standing in the second court of Ramses III at Medinet Habu, and looking at the art of the wall, remarked, "Scholars are amazed that a black man can be so prominently significant in this ceremony." They want to say, back in, I think it was, my history, I didn't get off the boat this morning. I got off the boat last night, So I was at 77. I was at the City University. G2 told me, Monderson, Fred, try to get the highest degree in the land. So I was at the City University, just out of Hunter, in my master's, and I registered for this school. And I get up on the 16th floor, and there's a guy up there, I think his name was Warren. There are 4 people in the class. And Warren said to me, "What are you doing here?" What he was saying is that I shouldn't be at that high level. I mean, it's not, perhaps he thought I was too young. It's the same thing when I was at Temple. And I said, Monderson, you can be a disruptive element. What he meant is that the question that he was asking, nobody can. Every time I asked him, so who said, "Oh, his Monderson's from New York." Then he said, "Well, it was a case of the student no more than the professor. So I wasn't supposed to be there." So this guy he's one of the great ones, right? He said, why is this black guy there? That is also at the Festival of Men, they read from the Book of the Negro. What is the Book of the Negro doing there? Why is the guy colored black? It's like okay, so that was my preamble. I gotta get to my introduction. Okay, I'm coming to this, but in the first court, and Dr. Ben took a lot of time to point out this. In the first court, there is Ramses II. On the northwestern wall, there is a procession called the Ascent of the Princes, where you see the 17 sons of Ramses II are heading to the temple of Luxor. And you see the statues and everything, the entire facade of the temple illustrated on that wall, and there are a bunch, and behind the sons of Ramses are a number of fat cows. And the lead cow has a crown on its head. These cows are going to be sacrificed in the festival to feed everyone. And the second cow is a Nubian lady coming out of the head of the cow. Why is this Nubian lady coming out of the head of the cow? Because she represented Hathor. And who's Hathor? Well, we see Hathor on the Norma palette at the beginning of Egyptian dynastic rule. Norma, I use the word blatant, but prominently displays Hathor. So, of course, we don't know much about Norma, but all we know is that he was a conqueror, he arrived, and they don't come to these people. What is his history, his background? And why is he traveling with his goddess that is often considered? Wallace Budge says that Hathor was from Nubia. Right? So we have in this important illustration at this important festival, this black lady coming out of the head of the cow, because Hathor was often pictured as a cow. Why a cow? Because the cow is the quintessential animal. It gives you milk, cheese. It gives you meat. It gives you it's a nurturing animal. So I'm sitting in the court, and every time I took my children there, we sit there and watch the procession come into the temple, and they run to the back. I'm working out, I may have said this before, I'm working out in the temple, taking the picture, and I hate to say it, I see this Egyptian guide emerge with these Asian visitors. And 1 minute and 30 seconds later, they were coming back out. Now what can you see? They're going there ready to take a selfie, see I was over there, you know. Right? So, but none of these guides notice, or either they notice that Dr. James talk about omission and distortion. Distortion, they're twisting out of kilter so that the wrong information would be presented, or omission. Again, don't mention it, kill it in committee. The guy is the secretary only read. I have two secretaries, different situations. They record what they want to record. So they don't mention this to visitors. It's only the enlightened black visitors or people like us who share the knowledge will mention that. Even some of the brothers who carry people to Egypt, they bypass that. So, for my introduction, so in Byron Schaeffer, in his book Temples of Ancient Egypt, he elucidated an important cosmological, philosophical conception germane to all religious practices, which he relates as sacred time and sacred space. As such, in this respect, he wrote, temples and rituals were loci for the struggle between order and chaos. At creation, the existent came into being amid the dark, inert, unbounded waters of the non-existent called noon, and took a multiplicity of forms in space and time. At creation, the cosmos existed in perfect harmony with the Creator's intention, the pristine stage Egyptians call Ma'at or order. The cosmos came to be shot through with uncreated elements representing the non-existent. Some, like groundwater and sleep, manifested the beautiful, regenerating aspects of the non-existent. But others, like desert and darkness, manifested its hostile, threatening aspect, which we call Isfet, which is disorder and chaos. According to Jonathan Smith, chaos is a sacred power, a creative challenge to order that is never completely overcome, a source of possibility and vitality that stands against order, but is inextricably related to it. So it's order, disorder, will be with us forever. It's a constant struggle, like the darkness, good and evil. So hopefully good will take a few jobs, but will prevail. Thus, sacred opposition between order and chaos found perpetual place in temples and rituals. Okay, so one of the functions of the priest is to pray constantly, because order is always challenging. They're at the borders of the temple, and we gotta pray and use incense and keep these devils out of here. It's an ongoing struggle. It's a struggle in a different form today. You know, even for the Schaefer noted, temples and rituals were loci for the creative interplay of sacred space and sacred time. Sacred space is a place of clarification, a focusing lens, where men and gods are held to be transparent to one another. So in sacred space, God and men can communicate. We don't want to believe this, that, or that, but these people, you know, Egypt is not there, despite the fact that it's been conquered. Right? So there was this mystic, I think his book was called The Search in Secret Egypt. So he wanted to spend the night in the temple, in the pyramid, the Great Pyramid. The people said, man, what's wrong with you? He said, you know, I need to go in there and see how things are at night after you guys are gone. Okay, well, you know, you've been our responsible. So he spends the night in the Great Pyramid, and he comes out and says, you know, there are people in there. And they told me what it is that we should do it. Right? It's like Malana Karenga said, bring good into the world. That's our function. But we hardly do that. Okay? They're reminding us that our job as humans, as cosmos, miniature aspect of the universe, is to bring good into the world. And you got to be careful about the words you utter. Okay? I mean, I don't even know how to say this, but I met a man that was on his way to the hospital, and I said to him, God go with you. The guy dropped dead in the hospital. He didn't even make it through the night. But I sent him to heaven. Right? I mean, you know, so you got to be careful of the things you say, because you never know. Like a ripple, your thoughts. It's just like the teacher. The teacher teaches the youngster, and the youngsters go forward, and they become even greater. Dr. James always said, I want my students to be even greater than I am. So, time, okay, so there a point where God and man can see each other. You can speak to God in that holy, sacred element right there. Not outside in the sunlight or whatever. A point that helps to be transparent, a point of communication, orientation and immersion, experience and renewal. Time, however, is not so stable a dimension of order as space. Egyptians experienced time as a spiral of pattern repetitions, a coil of countless rebirths. The purest moment of sacred time was the forest, the moment of creation, when it existed and its order emerged from the non-existent and its aspect of disorder. Subsequently, time as a component of order proved vulnerable to chaos. So, for example, the intervals between sunset and sunrise came to change from day to day and season to season, and the beginning of each new 360-day year came to rotate slowly. That is to say, they started losing a quarter of a day every year. Julius Caesar, when he went to Egypt in 30 BC, changed the European calendar to the Julian calendar and added a quarter day. In 4 days, he added a whole day. So we have what is called today the leap year. But the leap year for the Egyptians was by losing a quarter of a day over 60 years, they were able to readjust the calendar and add 1 year, which was the true leap year. Of course, the Julian calendar proved to be defective, and so in 1582, the Pope, his name, introduced the new calendar that we use today. Julian, I can't remember. Well, anyway. So, because of order's vulnerability to chaos, Egyptians need to conceive of creation not as a single past event, but as a series of first times of sacred regenerative movements currently regularly within the sacred space of temples through the medium of ritual and architecture. So architecture and ritual cause the gods to come and reside in the temple. Scholars have traditionally divided ancient Egyptian temples into several types. The two principal beings, divine, which is the residence of the god or gods, and mortuary, the place of ritual offering and sacrifices for a deceased king. So you have the worship temple and the mortuary temple, or the god temple and the king temple. However, divine and mortuary can mislead in at least 3 ways. First, insofar as they suggest that the temple's cultic practices were limited either to care for the gods or to concern for the deceased king. Second, insofar as they suggest that the recipient of mortuary rituals was not divine. And third, insofar as they suggest that ancient Egyptians saw the functions, the plans, the symbols, and ritual of divine and mortuary temples as distinct and separate. From Old Kingdom times, worship of mortuary temples were fused, but by New Kingdom times they became separate. So you have God temple and king temple. Much more, even though Schaeffer had made his argument, Dieter Arnold, German Egyptian specialist, functions in architecture especially. He spoke of royal complexes of the Old and Middle Kingdom. So back then, New Kingdom mortuary royal and royal temple and godly temples is not a New Kingdom phenomenon. It was in existence as early as the Old Kingdom and the Middle Kingdom. There were spaces for performing the rituals and erecting the symbolic architecture that transformed the king into a divine being. There were places for affecting and displaying his power and his association with other gods, which spanned the 3 worlds, the heavens, the earth, and underworld. Excuse me. Thus, the temple of Luxor came to represent one such example. And in its orientation, From the outside, doors became small. From the outside, looking in, the doors became small. Several doors, like compartments. There's such a thing in New York called railroad apartment. So the railroad apartments go that way. So the doors going in become smaller. Looking out, the doors become larger. That is to say, the space of sunlight that are entering into the temple becomes smaller as you go in and larger as you go out. So I mentioned that the God, of course, looks out to bless and admire his creation, and the king and his adherents look in to worship and ritualize. So, while Karnak can boast a 2,000-year period of construction, often referred to as vegetative architecture, because it was growing over a 2,000-year period, Luxor is more compact, a single structure built over a 200-year period, but one principally, then a second king. By one king principally, then a second king. That's to say, Amenhotep built most of the temple, and Ramses II came later, some 200 years later, and added to it. Now, again, we have a problem of interpretation, because even in this sacred venue, I learned that scholars differ. Dr. Ben, I always use Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark. Dr. Ben said that Cleopatra is one of those hated Greek rulers. And Dr. Clark said, well, she was an African queen, faced with the realities of the changing geopolitical world, and did what she had to do. So scholars differ, right? Many of them tell you that on one hand, Luxor is more compact, a single structure built over two by one principle than the second king. Right? So many of them will say, many have argued that the temple, that the Egyptians never built the plan. I mean, look, the Egyptians they didn't have the arch. So I said, well, look, they didn't know of McDonald's. But when I go to, whether it's Medina, the museum, or some of the stairway tombs of the Old Kingdom, you see the creation of the arch. Okay, so now some of them argue that the temple was not built by a specific plan. That is not true. They didn't have plans. There was one plan found in a tomb about showing how it was created, right? But think about it. For someone for an architect to arrive at such seemingly perfect arrangement of stone, you tell me that he didn't know what he was doing? That he was just willy-nilly just throwing things together? No. They built according to plans. So some of the scholars say, well, the temple built by Amenhotep III was only built up to the second pylon. The three pylons of that temple. We don't pay much attention to it. Shuala says the whole structure was planned from the beginning. Most of them say Luxor has two axes. He says no, Luxor has three axes. One of the axes is under the ground, chisels into the ground below the floor. So again, scholars, you have to, it's like the presentation of the evidence. And Brother Ray always tell you, in the beginning of all this lecture, here's all the information that's out there. Just sit on your fat cushions and expect that all of the information will come to you. You got to do your research. You got to analyze what is presented. Okay, Dr. James taught us how to develop intellectual autonomy so that you'll be able to looking at this guy and thinking about what he's saying, like you're doing me now. I wonder if he knows what he's saying, right? But you'll be able to weigh the evidence for yourself rather than be carried along with it. So, scholars differ, and people have different views as to how this temple was built. My job, as in my, I don't like to get into but there were some men in my life that significantly oriented me. Dr. Leonard James, Dr. Yosef Ben Johan, Dr. Clark. I knew these people. I was with these people. I read with these people. And they tell me, Dr. James, look for truth and expose it. Dr. Ben said, Monderson, choose one country and specialize in it. Publish or perish. And Dr. Clark said, speak truth to power. So, okay, again, here's a guy, Gladstone Bratton. I was thankful to this guy. He wrote a history of Egyptian archaeology, right? And he's the one that pointed out that Lepsius, the German, took 15,000 pieces, including some temples and tombs, back to Germany. This lady, Lorna Oakes, she said, Lepsius made 15,000 squeezes. What's a squeeze? It's like you go there and with one of these papers, and you try to trace an image, and And also I wanted to tell you, okay, so we hear a lot about these artists making images in the tombs. Sure they do. But the images, the line drawings that they create are of European images. Right? There was a guy a Frenchman who went into the tombs and made photographs of the images on the walls. And there was a guy, they had to move him because in the Deir Medina area, they're searching for more tombs. But he has the book. Yeah, thank goodness I found one like that. But they are actually sculpting exact images of the photographs. I just found an image, this week of Osiris. He looks so Negroid, he wouldn't be, you wonder, what's he doing there? So, but now Bratton says, in contrast to Karnak, the Luxor temple is simply and uncomplicated, consisting chiefly of a pylon, forecourt, a colonnade, another forecourt, hypostyle hall, and sanctuary, all on one straight axis parallel to the river. Again, the whole argument about where, okay, so when you go into the temple, beyond the pylon, into the court of Ramses II, it's called the Ramesian front. Okay. There is a kiosk that has been assigned to Thutmose III and Ramses II. But this kiosk was built by Hatshepsut. This Hatshepsut was a significant ruler, woman, but she wielded power creatively. Okay, she is the one who opened up what is called, okay, there are two axes of Karnak. So there is the divine axis, which runs east to west, which is the path of the sun god. And she created a new axis from north to south, so that you could go from Amun's temple to his son Mut's temple, Khonsu's temple, to Mut temple, and on the way to Luxor temple. Along the way, she erected 6 structures that are similar to the one in Luxor temple. So in the family feud that developed because she ruled instead of Thutmose, his adherents destroyed much of her work. He expropriated this temple And 200 years later, Ramses is there now come, remove his name and put his own name. The queen never gets credit. What we do know is that kiosk dedicated to Amun-Mut and Khonsu was the sixth and the last of a set from Karnak to Luxor. You see, the priests carried the bark of the god on their shoulders. Dr. Ben used to say, and then they come in and they zoops and they exchange and what. But they get tired. So these are way stations. It's like what you call a processional temple. Okay, we know that there's the mortuary, the divine or the god temple, the mortuary or the king temple, but there's also a processional temple, which is a temple, a wayside temple that's open on both sides, that when these people are going for great distances and they get tired, they just sit down there and chill for a minute and then continue. So Queen Hatshepsut erected, I've been called Hatshepsut's lover, that was one of my early names. She erected 6 of these, and that one is the only one that has survived, but she doesn't even get credit for that. But they tell you know, she made 6. So they give Ramses and they give Thutmose credit for that. So, in contrast to Karnak, the Luxor temple is simple and uncomplicated, consists chiefly of a pylon, a court, colonnade, a narrow forecourt, hypostyle hall, and sanctuary, all in one straight axis parallel to the river. So, because of where this temple was, this small temple, and you look into the deep recesses of the temple from where Amenhotep sanctuary is, the second sanctuary, there is one straight axis. Some have argued that when Ramses II decided to build his court, that he had to, this temple was in his way. So he moved it so that he can now reorient his court towards Karnak. Remember I told you about Karnak being triangulation. The land being triangulated, and Karnak was one of the principal terminus for all types of cosmic interplay. So in order to get to Karnak, you had to move this. And hey, well, I moved Thutmose. No, you didn't. You moved Hatshepsut. Karnak, as we saw, is not so much a temple as an aggregate of buildings, represented in the accumulation of almost 2,000 years, whereas Luxor is a comparatively unified structure and in its main features was built over a 200-year period. Thus, while Karnak, writes Beatty was one of the scholars of that age, so much vaster than its sister temple, bewilders and overwhelms as much as it impresses us. Luxor charms us by the clarity and intelligibility of its layout. Thus, Luxor, as a temple of Amun in the Alps, again, the Alps is where Amenhotep, the black god, lives in Luxor temple. Waset or Axor was designed to demonstrate pomp and circumstances at the height of Egypt's wealth and prosperity, when the city of Thebes sparkled with temples and built. Remember when I said that Breslin told us why the king built, when the king built the temple, he said that I overwhelmed people, and when they saw the temple, they praised me as the son of Amun. He says, Bram says, whereas Karnak represents an accumulation of structure, Luxor was conceived as a whole. So Schwaller says that the temple was built on a plan from the beginning. Even though this guy, so what I'm saying is that we don't know. Dr. Ben has a book on Ramses II, Black Cover. I was talking to Brother Sababu about. It's about the axes. The chief builders were Amenhotep, Ramses II. The appearance of the name of the pharaoh Sobek Hotep provides some evidence, although slight, that the temple was built on the site of a 13th dynasty shrine, but no other trace of the existence of such a sanctuary remains. Thutmose VII also built a shrine at the northern extremity. So you see here now, Thutmose is getting credit for this temple in the court. But the fact of the matter is that Hatshepsut, when she built that temple, remember we deal with the history of the temple. When she built that temple, there was an earlier temple there. And that earlier temple was dismantled by her architect Senmut, who left her kiosk, and then he built that temple, and then when Amenhotep came, he dismantled that, but again, they retained her temple, her kiosk. Why? Well, because the temple was dedicated to the Theban triad of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu. So they didn't really want to deal with, they didn't want to mess with the principal god structure because, you know, he may not have liked it. So they built around it. They say that Ramses moved it so that he could make his new axis. So, okay, Amenhotep III, okay, let me go back a bit. Thutmose's son, I gave you the genealogy. Amenhotep I, Thutmose I, Thutmose II, Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, Thutmose Amenhotep II, Thutmose IV, Amenhotep III, Amenhotep IV. Thutmose's son was Amenhotep II, not Thutmose III, Thutmose IV. His grandson was Amenhotep IV. He occupied the throne, followed by the fourth Thutmose's son, Amenhotep III. By the time there was some confusion as to his right to occupy the throne. As such, Amenhotep III really owed his position as the Pharaoh of Egypt in his greatest period of prestige to Thutmose III, who established the empire. Amenhotep's claim to the throne was at best a tenuous one, being neither the son of a royal couple nor married to the eldest daughter of Pharaoh. His mother, pay attention, his mother was the daughter of Mitanni king. His wife Ti was not of royal blood. It seems imperative, therefore, to remedy this defect in his qualification. And following the example of Hatshepsut, he attributed his birth not to humble parentage, but to the great god Amun. He erected Luxor temple, and on its walls were recorded a relief, the details of his divine birth. The gift of the temple itself would have been enough to forestall any question about his history. Pay attention. Throughout the history of the nation, rulers have always tried to justify their right to rule. That is, unless the old king expressly determined who would be his successor. Nonetheless, there was much projection about princesses from the east. Mitanni, for example, who came to Egypt to create a political alliance through marriage. As for example, Tajukipa's daughter came to marry Amenhotep III, but his powerful wife Queen Ti insisted that he marry the king's son Amenhotep IV instead. Yet her name was so difficult to pronounce, the Egyptians named her Nefertiti, the beautiful one cometh. While Queen Ti, on the other hand, was known as the most beautiful one cometh. And so Queen Ti sat and functioned in equality with her husband, Amenhotep III. Notwithstanding, while Nefertiti got lucky, as I say, Dr. Obenga explained all the princesses who came to marry simply became members of the king's harem. So they weren't in the front room, they were in the back over behind the curtain. In his own right, as a religious reformer who faced the wrath of Western criticism, regarding his physical body, his religious beliefs, his artistic and architectural innovation, and even his vengeance against Amun-Ra. Critics attacked his marital status with Nefertiti, who bore him 6 daughters, saying he could not father these children. We hear so much praise of her beauty, and she is often shown alongside the god worshipping the Aten. And she, now, if the children were not his, then she must have been a beautiful, unfaithful wife. You see, what they don't realize is that by attacking this guy, they're attacking the integrity of the woman that they're praising. So we have all these contradictions that we... because she relished in the glare of being there, being at the window of appearances, being with the king, and she was unfaithful, then the critics need to have their heads examined. Nevertheless, on that aside, Wiggle's claim is Arthur Wiggle. He's the guy who said he, after the discovery of King Tut, he spoke to millions in America. This is the guy who wrote a book, he had a chapter in his book, Flights into Antiquity, and talking about the exploits of a nigger king. What comes out of the mouth is a good indication of what is inside. Now, regarding Wiggle's claim that Amenhotep's mother was the daughter of a Mitanni king, James Barnwick in Ancient Egypt and Modern Thought wrote, Amenhotep III was so dark, many thought him an Ethiopian. The guy will tell me. It's like, they don't know these books that you tell them about. They know about the Daily News and the opposing they have. So he's saying that the guy was so dark, many people thought him an Ethiopian. So what does that tell you? That the Ethiopians were black, right? Okay, Aristotle, the great Aristotle, so George G.M.J. stole us how much data Aristotle stole because he came in with Alexander and he had access to all the data, right? Aristotle said in his book, Physiognomonical, that Egyptians and Ethiopians are cowards because they are black. Well, he admitted that Egyptians and Ethiopians are black, but we ain't cowards. We fought never fought as men. Okay? So he was right and wrong. The only other time a king has been right and wrong is when Sammiticus confronted with the Greeks in the waning years of the ancient Egyptian empire. He gave the Greeks a city called Naucratis. He said, okay, everything you do, everybody go in here, all the Greeks go in this city, and don't go nowhere else. So he was able to confine them to one area. So in doing that, he gets credit for doing one thing but serving another purpose. But Aristotle was wrong, and the name of his book is Physiognomonical, and he's telling us that the Egyptians and Ethiopians are black. They're not colors. Okay. Remember, Brother Ray mentioned Chancellor Williams, right? Chancellor Williams said two things. In the four-leaf, in the beginning of his book, the traveler asked the old man, what happened to the people of Sumer? I hear they were black. And the old man responded, they lost their history and so they died. But Chancellor Williams tells us that in his book, Destruction of Black Civilization, and then he has another one called The Rebirth of African Civilization. Right? He tells us that the 18th dynasty began black and ended white. Because it ended white because of Amenhotep IV Akhenaten's marriage to the Mitanni princess. Now, what do you mean by big? Okay, Flinders Petrie, the great one. I was in the library yesterday. He got what motivated me is when I encountered the fact that Petrie had a bibliography of 1,200 pieces. And the Frenchman, he had about 15, so I wanted to get up there with him, right? But he wrote, in Egyptian religion, he said that the 17th dynasty, and I quote, the 17th dynasty coming from Nubia held Thebes as his capital. Now, the Middle Kingdom ended and the Hyksos invaded and held Egypt for the second intermediate period. And one day one of the kings sent a message to the Thebans. The Thebes is called the fighting province, Wasek, fighting, they are fighters. He said, the hippopotamus wading in the water up there 600 miles away and making so much noise I can't sleep at night. And Amun said, hey, this guy's Arab. Let's organize an armada and go and punish him. So the 17th dynasty coming from Nubia, where the black people are, organized a war of liberation and ultimately kicked out the Hyksos. Manetho, who wrote a history of Egypt, created what came to be called periods and established that Ahmose, the last king of the 17th dynasty, should be considered the first king of the 18th dynasty. So Ahmose married Nefertari. There were two Nefertaris. Ramses' second wife, she was Nubian also. She was Nefertari. But the first Nefertari is the black goddess, the most venerated woman in all of Egypt. The most venerated person. There's no king or whatever had more status than her. She was made a goddess. I mean, you don't hear about humans becoming gods. Gods were gods, but human females becoming gods was unheard of. So she was the ancestress of the 18th dynasty. And when Hatshepsut was faced with opposition, she was saying, I'm the only one who was descended from the queen, from the black goddess. She had her temple, and her son, Amenhotep, he also had the same temple with her, and they were both made gods in Thebes as protector of the cemetery or the Theban mortuary area. So the 17th dynasty coming from Nubia held Thebes as its capital. The 17th dynasty is actually the 18th dynasty is actually a continuation of the 17th dynasty, but Manetho divided such because of the significant expulsion of the Hyksos and launching of the new era. Okay, let's deal with the history of the temple. I know that time is against me and there's so much more to go. What is important that scholars dig deep. Many experts offer different, sometimes contradictory views of various subjects. As such, while Arthur Wiggle points to a Middle Kingdom temple wherein Sobhotep III's name remains from the late 12th or early 13th dynasty, can we speculate the temple site may have been utilized as far back as Old Kingdom? Nevertheless, we hear from Queen Hatshepsut's architect Samuel, and he said he knew everything from the beginning of time. That he was in charge of all the queen's building operations in Thebes, the city of Luxor. We know the queen built the kiosk, which we talk so much about, within the great court of the Ramessian front. So therefore, there was prior building on the site that may have been torn down for the later structure. So along came Amenhotep, who built Luxor, then Ramses II extended its length by adding the great court. Prior to this, however, Amenhotep's son, Amenhotep IV, who led the Amman revolution, did erase the work to the temple. He halted his father's unfinished work. He built a small temple nearby dedicated to the Aten that was destroyed by Horemheb, who followed Tutankhamun and I. After his overthrow, Tutankhamun restored Amun to primacy by issuing the Restoration Declaration. King Tut then continued the work of Luxor by adding the art of the Opet festival, which is continued by Ar and Horemheb. The names vary, but in this case I use Amon, A-M-O-N. Some use A-M-E-N or A-M-U-N, just as I use Amenhotep, A-M-E-N-H-O-T-E-P. Some of them use A-M-O-N-O-P-H-I-S, Amenphis, or I use T-H-U-T-M-O-S-E, they use T-H-U-T-M-O-P-H-I-S. What that means is that in the 19th century, when, again, the great one, Philippus Petrie, started shifting. You know, if you heading in a direction and you just veer a little bit to the right, we end up over there. So what he started doing is using Greek names to describe the Egyptians, even though the Greeks came at the end of Egyptian civilization. So a lot of people have adopted the Greek name. One of the things one of the problems I had at Temple is that I corrected the scholar. He was spelling Saqqara, S-A-Q-Q-A-R-A. And I said, no, sir, it's supposed to be S-A-K-K-R-A. He said, Monderson, you know too much. So this guy did a lot of destructive work and what have you. Right? Seti I, who founded 19 dynasties. Actually, it was his father, Ramses I, then second one, then Ramses II. Seti I of the 19th dynasty, the son Ramses, continued the temple's upgrade as Ramses added the core, statues and walled the entire structure and created the great pylon, which he imprinted the Battle of Kadesh. Schwaller says the Battle of Kadesh never really happened. It was a symbolic, mystical, mythological propaganda tool that for this guy to just look at a group and kill 300 or 5,000 people at the thought, but he shows his argument outlined, and that's why John Anthony West says that Schwaller did his research and the events that he presented is hardly challenged. So let's talk about the architectural layout. So we had this argument of sphinxes from Karnak to Luxor, right? And you had these 6 way stations along the way, actually 5, and the 6th one was in the court, built by Hatshepsut, where the procession proceeded. Of course, getting to Karnak, getting to Luxor, there were 2 routes. Oftentimes, they came by boat, and keep in mind that Luxor is upriver from Karnak. So they depending on the weather, depending on what the condition of the river was, there would be people on the side of the river pulling the boat with rope. And there was a land route, which we call the Avenue of Sphinxes, that those are land, so they went by 2 different routes to arrive at the same destination. The great pylon was described in the famous Battle of Kadesh. We talked about that. The left obelisk. So at the end of the Avenue of Sphinxes, you arrive at the face of the facade of the temple. Okay, what do we have? We have a great big pylon, and you have 4 standing statues, and you have 2 seated statues, massive seated statues in front of it, right? And there are 2 obelisks, Eastern obelisk, the Western obelisk. The Eastern obelisk represents the birth, and the Western obelisk represents completion. Okay, so in 1836 of our 19th century era, the Egyptians gave to the French king, Louis XVI, the right Western obelisk. And he said, well, listen, I'll give you a clock. Well, in those days, a clock was a fascinating invention. So when the obelisk got to Paris and the clock got to Egypt, the obelisk was erected, the clock didn't work. Of course, when Napoleon decided he was going to winter, he was having his butt kicked by the British, and he retreated, just like how George Washington retreated to Delaware to lick his wounds and come back to fight. So he retreated to Egypt, but he took these savants or scholars with him, fighting intellectuals. So between battles, these guys would run away, visit the temple, and make illustrations and what have you, draw, and create what is called the description of Egypt. So the description of Egypt in 1800 led scholars, the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. So that impressed Europeans, the description of Egypt. All of a sudden, everybody was interested in Egypt. And then Champollion emerged, young man, about 12 or so, already spoke 6 languages. And ultimately, he was able to crack the hieroglyphic code in 1822. And he determined that he would read every inscription he could find. He was overworked. He died 10 years later. And so, all of a sudden, the discovery and the adventurers descended on Egypt, and it was a free-for-all that everything above ground that you get your hand on. As Sergeant Major used to say, if you didn't tie down, I'm moving. They moved. There was this famous circus performer named Belzoni. He would live up in it. He started today at what is called the Memphis Museum. He was trying to move this statue that is as long as from here, a little past that wall, and somehow with the other, he got tired and said, "This it ain't worth it." But whatever he got, he tried to sell it in Europe. And today now, they erected a building over it, and it's called the Memphis Museum. So by the end of the century, however, the archaeology of Egypt was in play. Okay, if you really see the images of the ancient structures, you got to give the European credit for the work they did. They took more than they should have gotten as payment. It's believed that American investors want to get 20% return on their money, so that in 5 years' time they get all the money. If there's a revolution in 6 years, they already got the 5 times 20 is 100. They got the 100% out of it. But everything after that is gravy on their butter roll, right? So they deserve some credit for some of the things they got, but they took too much, and we have to recognize that. The obelisk that was given to the French has been said that obelisk is tired because it's alone by itself. The one that remains still has the surroundings. And it's interesting because at the base of the obelisks were erected on a pedestal. And at the base of the obelisk itself, there were 4 baboons. And the baboons were shown with erect penises. Okay, so in French, the liberal French, they say that was too gross, so they severed that portion of the anatomy of those that are there. However, the eastern obelisk that is still there. So we go into the temple, we go into the court where Ramses II, the first pylon, we pass the pylon into the court that was called the Ramesian front. It stands 185 feet deep and 166 feet wide. But our list of courts is saying that it is a parallelogram. It is bordered on its 4 sides by a portico, that is to say, a set of columns, 2 columns. It's called, in some respects, it's called a peristyle court, because a peristyle is a line, sometimes of 1 or 2 lines of columns that has no roof. A hypostyle hall is a hall with roof of columns with roofs. So with a roof. So the portico or peristyle is sometimes have a covered walkway between the two columns. So you have Hatshepsut's temple over here. You have 2 rows of columns this way. All right. And what I mentioned about the image of what is called the ascent of the princes, the sons of Ramses II going to the temple of Luxor with the cows, the fat cows, and the Nubian lady coming out to the head of the second cow. That's on the southern wall. Over here, there are images of the king coming out from between the columns. Right. Now, on this side, to the north, is what is called where the mosque of Abu el-Hagab. This is the Luxor patron saint. This guy came from Syria in the Middle Ages to teach Islam, and they built the structure. And the structure that they built at street level was so high that it covered the temple. So that when ultimately the temple was excavated, you have the mosque from the ceiling here, whereas the temple is down here. So it's bordered on 4 sides by a portico with 2 rows of bud papyrus columns with cylinder shafts. So that is to say, the shafts looks like that. There are some columns that are round like this. The cylinders are like this. The walls of the court are decorated with scenes of the king sensing, making offerings, with chanting priests, and with thought recording gifts. The most interesting scenes are on the walls of the southwest rear. That is where I just talked about with the sons making the ascent of the princes to the temple of Luxor, which we're discussing. So past that, that wall, which had been the second pylon from the temple going up. So remember, the temple is built from the inside out, and the people visit from the outside in. So from the inside out, there was a first pylon, a second pylon, and then ultimately the great pylon that Ramses III built. So past the first, the second, the middle pylon, we have the colonnade. Okay, the colonnade it's called a processional colonnade because the procession passes through there into the Holy of Holies. This guy was he was called Magnificent. Amenhotep the Magnificent. He was a terrific builder. His greatest builder, his architect, was called Amenhotep, son of Hapu. So his father's name was Hapu. So he named his son after the king, Amenhotep. He was a great architect, right? And he was so good that he was allowed to put a statue in what became the Hypostyle Hall of today. And he had statues all over the temple. So he built the temple of Solar in Nubia. And the temple of Solar introduced the concept of the colonnade, the processional colonnade. All right? In Solar, there are 4 rows of 2. All right? 2, 2, 2, 2. He built the colonnade, processional colonnade at Karnak Temple. And the processional colonnade at Karnak Temple consisted of 2 rows of 6 columns. In Solar, it's 4 rows of 4. In Karnak, it's 2 rows of 6. At Luxor, it was 2 rows of 7. Okay, later in the 19th dynasty, it's believed that time didn't permit, but Amenhotep wanted to build a hypostyle hall to enclose the 2 rows of 7 in his temple. In the 19th dynasty, Seti comes along and his son Ramses, and he introduced what came to be called the hypostyle hall, consisting of 134 columns, including the 2 rows of 6. So you have 61 on this side and 61 on that side, and 12 in the middle. He was not able to finish this idea in Luxor Temple. Because he was not able to finish when he died, his son took over. His son led the Amarna revolution, and he destroyed much of the temple. And when he passed, Tutankhamun succeeded. Tutankhamun reversed all of his work, issued the restoration declaration, and then he continued building the temple, illustrating the temple with the events of the Opet festival, and then he was followed by Ai and Horemheb. Horemheb got to Karnak. He built what's called the 9th and 10th pylon. Again, the numbering of the pylon is interesting, okay? Let me say about the 8th pylon, because Hatshepsut was a great builder. She built her temple in Deir el-Bahari. She built the Red Chapel. She opened up the walkway for the north-south axis. She built those six way stations towards Luxor Temple, and she erected the 8th pylon. When Thutmose III came in, he defaced her name and expropriated the 8th pylon, put his name on it. Then when Amenhotep, we just talked about the 4th, in the Amarna revolution, he removed the name of Amun from the pylon and inserted the Aten's name, his god's name, and his name. And then in the 19th dynasty, when Seti came in, he removed his name, put back Amun's name, and put his name. So the name on the monument does not necessarily mean that that person created the monument. And Ramses II was famous for expropriating other people's names, their temples, by putting his name on it. Right? But he did a lot of building. So he did so many buildings that, he was a great builder. Now, if you want to, we spoke about Medinet Habu, where the festival of Min takes place. That is the mortuary temple of Ramses III of the 20th dynasty. Now, if you go into the first court, you will see the hieroglyph, the cartouches with his name are dug 8 inches deep, so that nobody could now remove or expropriate his temple by erasing his cartouche. So we passed the processional way into the court of Ramses, the court of Amenhotep III. South of the colonnade stands the beautifully proportioned sun court of Amenhotep III. It is a peristyle court measuring 146 feet deep and 166 feet wide, with a double row of 60 papyrus bundle columns. So you have to pay attention to the type of colonnade that are decorating this entire structure. So you have the round columns, you have the papyrus bud, the papyrus, the open, the lotus, what have you. The walls of the court are pretty poorly preserved, but traces of sea showing Amenhotep and Amun and others with Alexander the Great can still be seen on the left wall. In 1989, workmen sweeping the unpaved floor of the court exposed a large filled-in hole found to contain 26 large statues buried during Roman times by priests anxious to devote more temple space to statues of their emperors than to those of ancient Egyptian kings. That is to say, by the time the Romans got there, the priests said, let's worship the Romans and forget about our people. You know what that is. The perfectly preserved statues, some of them among the finest examples of Egyptian sculpture, are now in the Luxor Museum of Art. The effect, and this is a wonderful place for photographers, right? The effect of light and balance or light and shade. So as the sun wanes onto the western horizon, and it casts back the rays of the thing. Between the columns you have light and shade, and it's a beautiful sight that photographers love to shoot. The effect of light and balance or shade of the plant columns in this code can be considered regarding as the most successful of architectural beauty. So we enter the Hajj-Star Hall. Beyond the sun court lies the room of the original open temple called the covered temple. So from there now you have a roof of the temple. Everything else is open. And then go past it. So I mentioned that Luxor temple is peculiar in having two sanctuaries of Amun and that of the subsidiary rooms. Let me go to where I want to get. I know the time is against me, and I know that I hear Brother, he's not doing it, but I can hear Brother Ray ringing the bell. Monderson, let's talk about the Archie's temple, right? Okay, let me go to the meat. Let's dispense of the potatoes. Okay, so the cosmic, this is the fifth part of the presentation, right? If time permits, let me go back to the fourth, the art. So the cosmic, philosophic, religious, and spiritual nature of the temple. Okay, so John Anthony West, who is one of the disciples, his book called Serpent in the Sky, he says that Schwaller de Lubis began his work at Luxor on a hunch. The great temple there was the Parthenon of Egypt. Right? Margaret Murray in The Splendor That Was Ancient Egypt talks about the seven wonders of the world. And the Parthenon was one of the wonders. But unfortunately, the other six have vanished. The first wonder was the pyramids of Egypt. And they're still there. And the other things are either in museum or in theoretical discussions among scholars, but they have vanished. The Parthenon, that is a sacred structure built according to strict harmonic proportions. The site's revelations led Schwaller to interpret the whole civilization of Egypt. Egyptian civilization must be regarded organically as existing and passing through its various phases of life, phases in time. Whatever the political vicissitudes of Egyptian history, the temple, which was responsible for the religious, artistic, philosophic, and scientific life of society, performed its task in full consciousness and deliberation. West goes on to say that the Temple of Luxor, which Schwaller calls the Temple of Man, the Temple of Man, I had that book here somewhere. I wanted to show you its title. I must have left it in the car. The Temple of Man is the perfect example of symbolic understanding in stone. It's a fascinating stone structure, delicately and beautifully designed by Amenhotep, the son of Apu, and another assistant architect. It is a vast symbol, the greatest achievement of New Kingdom Egypt, incorporating within it or utilizing the totality of Egyptian wisdom, science, mathematics, geodesy, geography, geometry, medicine, astronomy, astrology, magic, myth, art, symbolism. All of these contributed to the temple, and all can be reapproached, studied, and within the limits of our own understanding, resuscitated as we discover the roles these various fields play within the temple structures. Everything I mentioned has something to a manifestation within the temple itself. The temple tells in stone, in its proportions and harmony, its art and sculpture, the story of the creation of man. It signals his development stage by stage, and it recreates in artistic form man's relationship to the universe. As such, let's continue. Planning of a structure as complex and subtle as Luxor is beyond our present capacities and alien to our way of thinking as well. So what we're looking at, studying, trust me, I get into this, getting ready to do this. Counting the criticism level of these great symbolists. Documentation supporting his explanation of the temple is as thorough and as elaborate as the rest of his work. The same formidable array of measurements, diagrams, and closely reasoned argument is provided. Nowhere is there argument or evidence that contradicts it. The guy spent 15 years measuring every square foot of the temple, every stone, every art, image, and they had it reproduced and so forth. The axis. The temple is over 800 feet long. West continuing questions the accepted view of the orientation of the temple. Prior to Shwala, no one could satisfactorily account for the strange plan. That is to say, the temple comes this way, but it turns this way so that it can get the corner. Some thought it caprice. Others thought perhaps the temple was meant to follow a curve. I never seen an axis with a curve. A curve of the nearby Nile, and still others thought that because the temple spanned over 1,000 years from its beginning to the completion of the forecourt, the alignment shifted according to some astronomical plan, which is a not unreasonable plan. However, the plan in its entirety was complete from the beginning. This was the argument. That the guy, the architect, planned out the whole thing. He didn't get to finish everything that he had on the paper. So along comes this guy 200 years later, and he completes it by walling the temple and erecting the great pylon. And then after him, others decorated the outside area. Okay, the plans in this curiously complex is strictly aligned upon 3 axes. Right? Remember, most temples have one axis. Karnak has 2, east, west, north, south. But this plan had 3 axes on horizontal. Without exception, every wall, colonnade, hall, and sanctuary is rigorously aligned upon one or the other of the 3 axes. It is therefore reasonable to admit the meaning of the axis is a very delicate affair, but there is no need to go into the complexities of art, magic, harmony, myth, and symbolism to establish factual existence of these axes. One of the axes is under the ground. Is under the flooring. So the flooring is covered with stone. So, but the measurements tell you that there are 2 on top and 1 below. He said that the axes are chiseled into the floor. You go there today, maybe you can see something that vaguely looks like what we're talking about. Because there is nothing in our own society that remotely corresponds to the Temple of Luxor, it is difficult to understand why Egypt should have extorted such infinite pains and genius and what is ultimately a symbolic gesture. They were making this place so that the gods can come and live here. And unless you did it right, God said, I'm coming. Remember I told you about the worm saying to the late, not the early bird, the late bird, I'm waiting for you to come, I'm going. Therefore, West has argued that Shwala calls the Egyptian philosophy the anthropocosm. Anthropo, study of man, cosmic, study of cosmic man. The man cosmos, a concept whose subtleties are not easily grasped. We talk about high science. sometimes in marry, I read something and then I want it to bring. I've read some of this guy's work, so I understand here. I mean, you call the shots. Tell me what's going on.
You got a couple more minutes, Monderson.
Okay, so, well, I have told you that the whole notion that God is white, God made man in his own image. The white man is superior in the social order, so in the natural order, so in the social order. So the anthropocosm may be found underlying all initiative philosophies, but differently expressed in different philosophies. Man is not a product of the universe, nor a scale model of it. He is to be regarded as an embodiment, its essence, incarnate in physical form. Given such, the Temple of Luxor is not a scale model of creation. It is not a stone equivalent of the laboratory skeleton. Rather, it is a symbolic model which conforms to scale. In one sense, it is a library containing the totality of knowledge pertaining to universal creative powers. This knowledge is not to be set down explicitly in books, but is embodied in the building itself. In another sense, the temple is in the nature of a magic rite, extending over 2 millennia, designed to evoke in the boldness of understanding of creation and creative power. It has boldness and immensity that undergirded in its beauty and its artistic magnificence, it makes this the quintessential New Kingdom temple. I'm going to stop right here because time is against me.
Anybody got a quick question for Monderson? Zoom audience? Anybody from the Zoom, quick question for Doc? No question? 5 more minutes, Doc, and then that's it, baby.
The proportions of the temple are those of Adamic man. Adam, man before the fall, and of perfected man. Man who has regained his cosmic consciousness through his own efforts. The temple excludes the crown of the head, seat of the intellectual faculty. So what this guy did is that when he had charted the temple, he put an image of the human body and was able to determine that each facet of the human physiognomy corresponded to a particular region of the temple. The cerebral cortex dualizes, permits distinction, creating the illusion of separateness. Adamic man cannot distinguish, cannot choose between good and evil, and perfected man has reconciled Seth and Horus. Remember the contending deities who were at each other from the beginning of time when Geb, the son of Ra, divided the world into 2 halves, give the southern half to Seth, the northern half to Horus, and then he said, wait a minute, let's change this. I'm giving Horus the whole pie, and Seth got upset when I have you.
Okay, I just got a question. Just want to question the authenticity of any European claims of creating the arches. The arches were created in Africa, specifically in Kenya, not in Greece.
Now, we're talking about different time periods, okay?
I'm talking about the original arches.
The arches?
Yes.
No, I spoke about that in the beginning. I said that the argument has been made that the Egyptians didn't know about the arch. I said they didn't know about McDonald's, right? But if you go to the museum in the back where the storage areas, there's nothing but arch. And even as early as the third dynasty, you have what's called the stairway tombs, right? The tombs that went down into the ground using the stairway.
Okay.
Right? So on the cornice of the stairway, the entrance into the tomb, there are arches that were, arches were put together. There was no one piece. I mean, the obelisk is a single piece of stone quarried, transported, and erected. The Washington Monument is a put together concrete thing with steel. So the arch was put together, but it was in existence as early as the third dynasty at least.
No, that was what I was saying, the arch itself is an African invention. It has nothing to do with Europe.
No.
There's no kind of claim that they can make that arches were created in Egypt.
No.
I mean, that arches were created in Greece. That does not exist.
No, what you were saying is that the prototype of the art was created in Africa, in Egypt. It's like the Japanese say we made the cars. No, Ford did. Created the prototype of Ford or whoever back then, and it developed. And so these guys come later, and they did the improvements and whatever and so forth. But so much has been.
I wouldn't call it an improvement, but you can use your language. It's not an improvement. But
well, what I meant is for them, we want to buy the foreign cars, so But I tried to show earlier. Okay, the Europeans did the excavation to make. Jeremiah called it the reclamation of Egypt. They went and dig the cemeteries, dig out this, that, or whatever. They cleared the land. Today you go to Egypt, you see it's different from what it was 150, 200 years ago. Okay? But the interpretation and the presentation of the document, okay, I'll tell you, I don't need to tell you what I've been doing over the last, I'd say 3 months. Okay, in the library, okay, but I have done my own reclamation, okay. So the evidence is there. It's the interpretation of the evidence, okay, and that is why, as I said in the beginning, we have to learn how to do intellectual autonomy so that we can weigh and evaluate and analyze the evidence that's presented rather than accept the evidence as is presented, as you indicated, my brother.
all right.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, give Dr. Monderson a round of applause. We want to thank the Zoom audience, and we want to thank the people that came in and supported the Maggie's group. And this is just the beginning of Monderson's talk about Egypt. And give him a great big hand. Thank you.